In this video, we're going to continue our discussion of the different elements of an effective safety management system. One of those elements is an emphasis on continual improvement. Companies should always be looking to get better. Good is never good enough. If you work for a company that's content with where they're at, then that company's probably not as successful as it could be. There aren't any perfect companies out there. There aren't any companies that can't improve in some way. When it comes to safety, companies should always be looking for a safer way. That was one of my sayings in everywhere I've ever worked, always looking for a safer way. And I'd never, even with Kiewit, the better company I was with, the best company I was with, there was always a safer way. Now sometimes you got to balance the safer way with what's practical and what's cost effective. Now you can be so safe that you're not profitable, but there's a way to be safe, protect workers, and still be profitable. The diagram that you see here is representing what we call the PDCA, or the Deming cycle. The plan, do, check, act cycle, also referred to as the Deming cycle. It was originally developed by a guy named Walter Shewhart, who was Deming's collaborator. Deming received most of the credit for the idea, but Shewhart should receive equal amounts of credit. He was very influential in the development of this approach to continual improvement. And it is a continuous cycle approach that starts with planning. We plan our operations. We spend time planning our operations. We do, which is implementing the plan. Once we implement the plan and the plan is in operation, we evaluate or check the effectiveness of what we're doing. This is where honest evaluation comes in during this checking phase. Is this really working as well as we want it to? Is it working as well as it could? We study the actual results. We compare against what we expect. And based upon that checking, that evaluation, we implement corrective actions. We make some changes. We make some tweaks, all in an effort for improvement. Always trying to be as good as we can be with our operations. Now, this applies to more than just safety management. This applies to management in general. But what we're talking about here is this approach when it comes to safety management. And again, being a continuous cycle, it never ends. We plan, do, check, act, then we do some more planning. Then we do some more doing, more checking, and more acting. It's a constant process of getting better. And the successful companies out there are those companies that follow the Deming cycle or something similar to the Deming cycle. The Deming cycle goes back to the 1960s. It was first implemented by different Japanese companies. Deming's ideas and Shewhart's ideas didn't really take off in the U.S., but the Japanese companies loved their approach to management, which we're going to talk more about. This is part of what we call TQM, or total quality management, which we'll talk about when we talk about some specific safety management systems. Again, Japanese took this approach, they implemented the approach, and had great success with it. Then in the 80s, we started seeing companies in the U.S. adopt this approach. And it has proven to be a successful approach for companies that were looking to improve and companies looking to be the best they could possibly be. So, continual improvement. If you work for a company and they seem to be content, they're not looking to improve, then that might be an indicator to you that you want to look for another company. But not necessarily. You don't have to leave a company just because they're not interested in continual improvement. But the better companies are always looking to get better at what they're doing, better in their operations. Another important part of an effective safety system is a written safety program. It is the corporate game plan for how to manage safety and how safety will be executed. And you may be thinking, well, doesn't every company have a written safety program? Every company should, but every company out there does not have a written safety program. The first 2 companies I worked for did not have written safety programs. I had to write it. The first company I wrote the entire thing. In the second company, it was a committee working together to write the safety program. But here's an example of what would be included in a written safety program. Now, this is a very general program. Now, there's more specific planning that goes along with safety management. But this is the corporate game plan. This is like the football team. This is what they want to do when they go into a game, their plan for what they're going to do. But that plan is going to have more specific elements as well. But this particular simple example, we have several different sections. We have corporate policy statements, operational safety policies, health and safety programs, some specific health and safety programs like respiratory protection, fall protection, forklift safety. Then we have a section for safe operating procedures for heavy equipment usage, using power tools, office safety even. I was working for a construction company, but office safety is something that you can't overlook. There are injuries that can occur in an office environment. Slips and trips, back injuries, repetitive use types of injuries, disorders in an office environment, concrete safety, work zone safety. Now, these specific safe operating procedures that you have in your written program, some of that's going to depend on the industry. This is from a highway construction company, bridge company. So that's why you're seeing stuff like concrete and work zone safety. If you work for a manufacturing company, they're not going to be dealing with concrete or work zones, so they may not have that in their written safety program. Also included environmental protection measures or procedures, spill control plan, general environmental protection, subcontractor safety agreement, loss control procedures, then accident management. And what do we do? How do we conduct ourselves when an accident occurs? Companies that have a plan, they need to follow the plan. They need to update it periodically. It needs to be a collaborative plan. If the plans are changed or updated, it shouldn't just be one person doing it. If a company needs a new plan, it shouldn't be just one person writing the plan. And ideally, management's involved. Upper management's going to be involved in the process. It should be tailored to the specific operations of the company. And here's that management-driven point again. It needs to be management-driven. Management needs to be in complete agreement on the program. And they're going to be a big part of implementing the program also. Now, I could do a whole class just on written safety programs, but we need to move on, so let me go ahead and move on. Incident investigation. Anytime there's an incident, it needs to be investigated. All incidents, including near misses, including property accidents or vehicular incidents. The focus of the incident investigation is going to be on identifying the root cause. And there are some different tools that can be used. We can do a 5 whys analysis or a fishbone analysis, or we can use the critical incident technique in our incident investigation. Again, the goal of an incident investigation, find the cause, prevent future incidents. This is part of our continual improvement process also. Now, we will have a unit later in the semester where I focus in more detail on incident investigation and some of these different methods or tools that are available. One thing I will go ahead and mention when it comes to root causes, we want to find root causes. And if we do our investigation thoroughly, oftentimes what we find are root causes at the management level. It's not the worker's fault. If a worker falls off of a bridge because he's not tied off, that's not necessarily the worker's fault. It's very likely a problem at the management level. Poor management decisions often lead to incidents in the workplace. Clear roles and responsibilities also improve the effectiveness of a safety management program. Everyone in the company should be involved. Ideally, the company will have an organizational chart that describes who does what within the company. There are defined responsibilities for everyone within the company. There are expectations. What should each employee be contributing to the safety of the operation? Ideally, this organizational chart and all that goes along with it will be specified in writing. It will be clearly spelled out for everyone in the company. And when it comes to, for the third time now, everybody has a role to play when it comes to safety. It's not just the safety professionals within the company. When it comes to you as a new safety professional, one thing I want to warn you about is be careful wearing too many hats. There are companies out there that are hiring safety professionals, and they have safety responsibilities, but they may also have responsibilities for environmental management and also maybe other management responsibilities like managing the Equal Employment Opportunity Program, or there may be something that their work they do with regard to human resources, the hiring process and such. It's becoming more common that safety professionals wear the safety and environmental hat, but if it goes beyond that, that could be problematic. Safety and environmental's okay, but beyond that, it could be overloading the safety professional. Some companies are even adding quality control to the responsibilities of safety professionals, and I think that's going too far. I don't think that is good for the company when they start having their safety professionals do quality control and environmental management along with safety management. Also, as a safety manager, remember you are managers. Learn to delegate. Learn to delegate some of your responsibilities. Get the other people within the company involved. Delegate some of the safety responsibilities to the foreman, to the superintendents, to different workers that may have an interest in safety. You shouldn't have to do it all within your organization. Everyone should have a safety role. Recognition programs, incentive programs are also can also be effective for safety management. With recognition programs, incentive programs, we're talking about rewarding positive behavior. Behavior that is rewarded will be repeated. Rewards do not have to be of high value. Rewards connected to specific behaviors or performance are best. If you have high value incentives that you're using in your company, ideally it's going to be a committee decision as far as who receives those high value incentives. Now let me give you an example. My first company I worked at as a safety professional, at the end of the year, everyone in the company who had been with the company for at least a year was eligible for a safety incentive bonus. These were bonuses that could be $500 to $2,000. The safety director or the safety manager should not be the only person involved in making those decisions. Who receives those bonuses? $500 to $2,000 bonuses. It should be a committee. We had a safety committee. The safety committee would meet at the end of each year, and we would discuss each employee in the company and decide as a committee who received the incentives and who didn't receive the incentives. If there's just one person making this decision, that puts that person in a very difficult predicament. If somebody doesn't get their bonus, and they're blaming it on that one person. But if a committee makes that decision, then that person doesn't. It's not as easy for that person to be critical of the process if there's a committee of individuals involved. Our safety committee, my first company, we had 8-10 people involved in making decisions about high value incentives. But for this kind of behavioral modification to be successful with rewards, the rewards do not have to be of high value. It could be a pat on the back, telling a worker that he's doing a good job. You see workers out on a bridge job, they're all tied off. You tell them all they're doing a good job. You bring them all together and say, hey guys, I really appreciate the effort you're putting into safety. You doing the right thing makes my job easier and makes your life better. So thank you for doing that. That type of recognition can be very valuable in a company. And that's also an example of rewards being connected to specific behaviors. You're rewarding a worker for doing something specific, tying off correctly, or using lockout tagout correctly if you were in a manufacturing environment. Or maybe you see a worker cleaning up a spill in the warehouse. Recognizing that worker, rewarding them with a pat on the back, or it could be something more tangible too, but it doesn't have to be high value. Some companies will have programs called where they use what they call safety bucks. That somebody's doing something like cleaning up a spill, they will be given a safety buck. They accumulate enough safety bucks, they can then go to the company catalog and purchase prizes or purchase something with the safety bucks that they've accumulated. There are pitfalls of incentive programs. It can become an entitlement, or employees start to think of the safety bonus, the safety awards, as an entitlement. And if they don't get it, they feel like they're being mistreated or punished in some way. It's not an entitlement. We need to manage the program so that it doesn't become an entitlement where everybody gets a safety award regardless of what they do in the company. We also need to manage the program so it is directly connected to safety performance. We don't want this disconnect between the recognition and the safety performance. If someone's getting that bonus at the end of the year that's supposed to be tied to safety, we need to make sure that it really is tied to safety performance and not productivity or something else. I had to stop there for a second. I was getting overheated. I had to take my sweater off. It's a little bit too warm for what I was wearing. And we're talking about pitfalls of incentive programs. Another potential problem with an incentive or recognition program or a reward program would be unrealistic expectations. If workers feel like there's no way they can achieve the expectations to earn the reward, they may develop this why try mentality. It's good to have, maybe you have some awards in your program that are associated with really high expectations, but then you have some other lower level rewards that don't have such high levels of expectations attached to them. This, I think, is the biggest problem with incentive programs. It can lead to non-reporting of incidents. If your incentive program is based on workers not being injured, then a worker who is injured may not report their injury because they do not want to lose out on the end of the year bonus or something along those lines. And that's what we'll see in some companies. Some companies will have a bonus for going the entire year without being injured. Well, that can cause non-reporting, and we want workers to report their incidents so we can know how to prevent those incidents from happening in the future. So that's something that you have to watch out for if you work for a company that has an incentive program. You need to make sure to manage it so that it doesn't contribute to non-reporting of incidents. Another potential pitfall is when the rewards are given to an entire crew, team, or work group. This is another thing companies will do. They will give a reward to an entire work group or an entire construction crew. Instead of rewarding individuals, they give the rewards to the entire crew, the team, or the work group. Well, this might end up rewarding individuals who maybe really don't deserve one because they really aren't that safe. I would encourage you to consider, if you were managing a program like this, to have some rewards perhaps that are rewarding the crew, but still have rewards that focus on individual performance. We need to realize that whatever we reward within our organization, that is probably what workers are going to emphasize in their efforts. If a company emphasizes how much concrete is poured in a year, and that's rewarded, the more concrete, the bigger the reward, well, that's going to be the focus of the workers. Let's do whatever we have to do to pour concrete. If the company values safety performance and rewards that safety performance, then workers are going to be more inclined to pay attention to safety and work more safely. Now, the flip side of the incentive program, the incentive program is where we're rewarding positive, good, safe behavior. The flip side of that is an accountability disciplinary program, holding workers or crews accountable for not doing such a good job. Now, rewards have proven to be more powerful than punishments. The carrot, a reward, more powerful than the stick, a punishment. And this is a basic tenet of behavioral safety. We should try to reward positive behavior rather than punish the negative behavior. Positive, safe behavior, or reward safe behavior versus punishing unsafe behavior. Now, disciplinary programs are only going to be effective if there are clear expectations and there is consistency in the application of those expectations. You need to have clear definitions of what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. And when the unacceptable behavior occurs, it needs to be dealt with the same way every time. And that's where we see companies get into trouble and where they have problems with these programs. They don't apply their justice equally. They'll let one worker get away with behaving unsafely, but they'll punish another worker for doing the same thing. That ruins the entire system. The whole thing blows up when there's inconsistency in the application of the program. What most companies will adopt is what we call a progressive discipline program. The consequence of a violation, say a violation of company policy, increases in severity with each transgression. Most companies that use progressive discipline programs will have an immediate termination clause that they can use in extreme cases. In this program, none of these programs will work if they're not exercised properly and consistently. Now, on the issue of progressive discipline programs, this is the typical progressive discipline sequence. The first violation, the worker receives a documented verbal warning. The second violation, they will receive a written reprimand that goes in their personnel file. Then the third violation, the third transgression, results in termination. But again, if it's not applied properly, if it's applied selectively, it may do more harm than good. Companies have to be very careful with incentive programs and disciplinary programs, or it will be counterproductive. It will damage morale. There could be so many negative consequences of an improperly managed program. Got to be very careful with these programs. And like everything else, the correct function for the incentive and the disciplinary program really depends on upper management. It's not about the safety professionals in companies. It's about upper management and what they support and what decisions they make. In some instances, the end product of a disciplinary action will be the termination of personnel. This is a very difficult decision for management to make. It's usually a last resort. Safety personnel, especially in the early stages of your career, will not have the independent authority to terminate personnel. What we do as safety professionals, especially in the early stages of our career, we document violations, we make recommendations, and we work with upper management who will be making the decision. It's very difficult to terminate a worker or be involved in the termination of a worker. Workers losing their job. They probably got a family. They probably got bills to pay, car payments, house payments, and so on. That's very hard to make that decision. But terminating an unsafe worker may be saving their life or the lives of other workers. If you have a worker that has a complete disregard for their own safety and the safety of others around them, the best thing in the world we can do for them is either to terminate them or recommend them for termination, because we're dealing with safety-sensitive issues, life and death issues. Someone's not safe, someone has a complete disregard, it could cost someone else their life. In my experience, though, most terminations that occur that I've seen, they've not occurred because of safety issues. Here are the most common reasons for termination. And this is not just safety related at all. It's not safety related at all for the most part. Not showing up for work. They have too many funerals. They have too many illnesses. They have too many family emergencies. That loses workers their jobs maybe more than any other possible reason for the termination. Showing up late on a regular basis also results in terminations. Financial transgressions, misuse of company credit card, misuse of company accounts, theft from the company. Those are the big three as far as causes of termination. Most companies, when they hire someone, they don't want to terminate them. They want to keep them. They want them to be a good employee. But if someone's not showing up, or they show up late on a regular basis, or they're abusing the finances of the company, those are usually going to be the grounds for termination. As far as being successful and avoiding termination, if you're dependable, if you're willing to learn, if you show up, and you show up on time, and you have some enthusiasm for your job, you're probably going to do well in your career, whether it's safety management or supply chain management or whatever it might be. But 90% of life is showing up and showing up on time. If you do that, you've got it pretty much kicked. So if you're not, if right now you're at that point in your life, I'm getting kind of preachy here, I'm getting away maybe from the safety side, And speaking to you from giving you some professional advice, if you're not at that point in your life where you show up on time, work on that, because that can really slow down your professional development. I'll give you one example of this that's close to the program. One of our graduates, not going to name any names, one of our graduates, he was a decent student. And he had a problem with attendance when it came to coming to class and showing up on time and all that. But he got a job with a company in Pryor, Oklahoma, and he worked with this company. He was with this company for about 6 months. It was a good job. It was a good entry-level safety management position. They let him go. They let him go because he couldn't show up on a regular basis. At least one day a week, he would have a family emergency or an illness or something like that. And even if those are legitimate, even if the illness is legitimate, even if the family emergency is legitimate, employers don't. When they hire someone, they're hiring someone to do a job. If that person is not there to do the job, then they've got to find somebody else who will. It's at that point, it's not personal. It's not we're firing you because you have a family emergency. We're firing you because you're not here and we need somebody here. We got to find somebody who will be here. I'm sorry that you're having family emergencies, but we got to find somebody that will do the job. So, some things to think about as you move forward in your career. All right, how are we doing on time? I'll go ahead and mention this. This is another example. This is an example of the progressive discipline being applied. We had a truck driver, first company I was with. He was a great guy. Loved this guy, but he was kind of accident prone, and he was a little careless at times. He didn't always dot his I's and cross his T's. And this particular incident, what he didn't do was lower the boom on the excavator low enough. He was hauling an excavator, and he needed to lower that boom further to clear this railroad bridge. He didn't lower the boom enough. He went under the bridge here, and that boom that was sticking up caught the metal lip here on the bridge. And you don't want to do damage to a railroad bridge. That's just a big pain in the rear. The railroads are very difficult to work with when you start damaging their property. This was his third strike. As much as everybody liked him, it wasn't good for the company to keep him around. I've got another couple of other examples like that too, where just because a guy's a good guy or a good woman, if they're accident prone, if they're always late, if they're always having some kinds of problems, then the company's got to think about what's best for the company and the other workers. And in this case, it was best for the company and the other workers to let this gentleman go. All right, I'm going to end this video here. When we come back, we will talk about internal auditing and monitoring of work operations.